Hello.
Hello.
Welcome back to week 3 of the Sewing Bee, West Africa week. But before we start talking about that, we'll have a quick look back at last week and the comments. They were flocking through Ting on YouTube. I think there was nearly over 50 comments.
That's what I like to see.
It was like the school report days for me. I was like, right, I've got to sit down and answer everyone's comments. But lovely to have your comments. Lovely to read them. Make us laugh, especially as they all disagreed with you, Ting. But many of them were so polite in how they said it. Let's have a look. Portia here. Sorry, Ting, she says. I disagree with you regarding the pattern challenge. She was loving the rucksacks. And Lillian also, she said, first of all, I think Ting was restrained this week with his slippers. 3 slippers was week.
Well, that would imply that she had a lot more going through the air then.
Again, another one that liked the rucksack challenge. Lynn, I actually liked seeing the rucksacks being made. I think a lot of dressmakers are bag making as well as that, as well as the moment. Sorry, Ting. So we had another apology. Our viewers are so polite, but they are. That's nice, isn't it? Thanks, chaps. Love listening to the after show chat. Thanks, Lynn.
She'd have a different opinion if she actually sat down and made one.
Carol, again, sorry, Ting. I make lots of bags, rucksacks included. Makes a change. It did make a change, didn't it, actually? Very much so. As we've always said, sewing is more than just dressmaking.
Yeah.
YJ Child says... got a nice comment there about the swimsuits and everything, and how she perhaps felt, there's me guessing their pronouns, with Jilly there and the mistake. And we touched on that, didn't we? We were sort of the judges and how they came to the agreement, knowing that end decision was going to be difficult. But she says there, they say that at the end, I threw both slippers.
Yes, we must remember that while my slipper count is unending, most people do only have the 2 slippers to throw. It requires a lot of climbing behind the telly to retrieve them if you need to reload.
And we'll finish with Caroline, who says, I have no idea what those original windbreakers are. Maybe this is a British thing. And then Elise replied with, they are a staple of the British summer holiday. And speaking about British summer holidays, I've got a classic one here for you with a windbreak in the background. There's me there, age 3. Yeah. Great Yarmouth. And my brother. And if you look closely here, look, there's a windbreak. So what are we talking about? 76 I was born, 77, 70. So 79 windbreaks were flourishing.
What people from outside the UK need to realise is that here on the East Coast, we've got the North Sea. The wind comes straight down from the Arctic and the Norway and everything like that. If you don't break the wind on those beaches, you're going to get blown away by it.
And I know you loved the history bit and you wanted it back, so it's back. We've done a special episode, a little history bit for you. Ready? Sadly, we couldn't afford Amber, so there's no Amber. So I've gone out and filmed a little history bit for you on Oh, hello. You look a bit windswept there. Do you want to come over this side? It's much nicer. Come on in. How much better is that? So here I am on Felixstowe Beach, wonderful, surrounded by beach huts, the promenade, and of course the North Sea. The great British seaside holiday had its heyday post-war in the 50s and 60s, and Felixstowe was one of those places. And that's because holidays became more affordable thanks to the Holiday Pay Act of 1938. You had paid annual leave for the first time, so people could come on holiday. In the 1950s
50s and 60s, it was unusual for families to go abroad for their holiday. So, of course, they went to the seaside in Britain. You could, if you were lucky, stay with a friend if a friend lived near the coast, or you would have a guest house, or you would camp, or you would have a hotel, or you might have even been at Butlins or Pontins. If you were in the Mills north working, then maybe you would have gone to Blackpool or Morecambe, or if you're a Leeds way, you would have gone east to Scarborough and Filey. Down south, well, a whole plethora of coastal places, Brighton, Bournemouth, Margate, and people would flock to the seaside towns for candy floss, for amusements, for fish and chips, and for the sea. And when you're on the beach, you'd have to get your deck chairs out, or you might have hired it, or you would have got your glorious windbreak, here in traditional Blackpool stripe colours. When windbreaks were first invented, they were used with fabric in between the 4 or 5 poles. But since the invention of nylon and plastic, post-war, it is made from polyethylene or polythene, and it's virtually indestructible. One thing you do need when putting up your windbreak is a good old mallet. It makes it so much easier. This isn't going anywhere. So the windbreak's function is not only to break the wind and make it nice and cosy, it's also a nice place to pitch your space, to tell everyone, this is my part of the beach, don't you come sitting near. It's a bit like the whole towel thing when you go on holiday in the seats outside of the hotel. It also is a great place to get changed. So I'm now going to get into my swim shorts, no Speedos here, not just yet. And I'm going to go for a dip, and I can get changed easily because of the windbreak. No more having to put a towel around myself and trying to get my pants out and get my Speedos on. No, I can get changed quite easily here, safe in the knowledge that no one's going to be looking, and protect my modesty. Windbreaks have developed into something very fashionable now, almost a tent-like windbreak. So you not only have shelter from the wind, but you have shelter from the sun too. I think it's time for some coffee from the old flask, and it's if I haven't got too much sand in my lunchbox, sandwiches, homemade, classic Marmite and cheese. Happy summer holiday.
There you are, Ting.
A cheese and Marmite sandwich? Oh, God, no. I might have to throw a slipper if we're not careful.
You threw a slipper at my history bit.
Well, no, your cheese and Marmite sandwich.
I did a little bit of research there. Clearly not as knowledgeable as Amber was, and is. Hopefully we'll see her, I think, as the season progresses and we lose some sowers, a longer history bit will appear and she will be on our screens.
Yes, because we did get a little bit this week, didn't we? Because obviously West Africa week was new to all of us. So we got a little bit more detail of where the garments come from and how the fabric is made, which was great because it just added that little bit extra in. Either that or they were listening to the edit last week.
Of course. Right, so let's quickly look at who is left. So we've said goodbye to Catherine, and then last week we said goodbye to Gilly. So we're now down to 10 sowers. There they are on your screens. Have you got some favourites yet? Have you got ones that are popping out at you that you want to carry on seeing, Ting? Anything from you, favourites-wise? Anything firmed up from last week?
It's still not really speaking to me at the moment.
No?
Although I think both Tonys are dark horses to keep an eye on. And we know that Asma is good. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you remember me saying last week that I was interested in... I said Lizzie and Lauren. They were my ones to watch out for. Still looking for them. It's funny, isn't it, how you get attached to them? Oh, and of course Tony too. But that's the beauty of the program, isn't it? And the edit and how they are and how they come across. So there we go. So let's crack straight into it then. The pattern challenge. Just going to move my screen on. And what they had to do, and this is, forgive me, viewers, for maybe getting the words wrong, to make a traditional West African garment, the batakari, and you can see it there. Now, one thing they did say was they simplified it for the show. Well, blimey, if they simplified it, seeing how challenging I thought this was for a pattern round, how difficult is the actual one?
Well, yes, but I mean, I've never made one. Why would I? But equally, I thought actually it was relatively easy thing to do. The only thing that I thought may have tripped them up with the pockets thing.
Yeah.
So, and I think when you look at that lineup there, they've all pretty much hit it. I know there are individual elements, which I'm sure we'll discuss in a moment, but for something that I'm imagining not a single one of them has made, they all done really well.
Absolutely, because there were so many different aspects and techniques to this. Sewing those strips together, which for us as patchworkers, they were like jelly roll strips, weren't they? So that's probably not an
Yeah.
issue. Putting the go days in, which we've talked many a times on about when we did our Strictly show about how good a go day is. But then they had to do the neck piece and then those pockets. But it seemed like out of all those skills, it was the pockets that messed up for many of them, that caused an issue.
Yeah, and I think, when you look at the way it was constructed, so, the whole cutting the neck hole out of the fabric rather than sewing panels together, that created one issue. And then the pockets were the other issue, because you couldn't actually place your pocket or your pocket until you'd made the smock. Whereas again, normally it would all be built into the pattern and constructed as you went along, where these were all done. So therefore you were trying to eye it up where it wanted to go, instead of having a pattern piece that was 5 inches long and then you knew that the opening was going to be at the top. This was kind of like, you need to make it, and then you've got to decide not only how far up it goes, but that also that the one on the other side is in the same place. Whereas a proper pattern piece, it would have been cut to the pocket top or bottom or whatever you want to.
And we saw that, didn't we? How many of them were like, "Oh, I'm just going to do it by eye." Some had measurements or were trying to balance it out. But look at the result there. You've got a pocket there, because I think they needed it in the center. That was the requirement, wasn't it? In the center between the sleeve and the hem. But then look at them where they are. It's in relation. I think wasn't one right up there. Well, we'll look at that in a minute. So when it came down to it, as you say, some of them were right with the go days and the seaming together, but when it came to the pockets, everywhere. So let's take a look at a few. Go on, Ting.
Oh, I was surprised with the go days because, if you've made skirts and dresses like that, you may have inserted go days, and there was a number of them who didn't get their go days level. So, the points should have all come to the same height. They were all different points, and there were problems with the bottom and that as well. And when they were going through the initial instruction, I thought it was a relatively easy thing for them to do. They just had to line up. So whether they'd cut their pieces wrong so that they weren't necessarily, the go day inserts were not necessarily all the same size, but, they ended up with the points, being rather jagged rather than, all lined up with each other, going all the way around and creating a smooth kind of flare.
Well, let's take a look at a few in detail and see if we can see that actually happening. So, first of all, let's take a look at Asma's there.
Very nice.
It's difficult to get these into a long shot. I had to wait for the camera to pan out on some of them, but you can see the sewing of the strips there really effective, can't you?
Yes.
And she had the stripes one, which I think worked really well. I think someone was saying, "Oh, don't give me stripes, don't give me stripes." But the choice of interfacing was really good, and among many of them. Let's go to Fauve. There we go. Some of them have this issue, didn't they, where they put the neck either slightly too forward or too back. So like that one, what the neck was too
and
too back
I mean,
forward,
obviously,
so it then rose up at the front.
yeah, but also with this one, it didn't help having those red lines because they've really highlighted how the go days don't line up and how
Yeah.
that one that goes from the base of the neck, it actually veers off to the left rather than going straight down the body. Now, I know some of that will be related to the fact that that red is in the pattern of the fabric, but by having a fabric that was bordered with the red,
Yeah.
it kind of highlights how they go out of line with each other, really.
And is that, I can't see, I'm looking, is that the top of one go day and then is that the top of another go day? Is that what you're saying?
On some of them are unequal. I don't know
Yeah.
whether it is on this one because I think that red edging is throwing it off as well.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it certainly doesn't look even because it's not flaring out evenly. There's too much on that right-hand side.
And then we've got Lauren. I loved the colour of that denim. That indigo and the pink hair strips was lovely. Reminded me very much of the whole Jack Wills look of pink and navy.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously a thing because they have to weave those strips of fabric because she's got the pink either side of the fabric. So you're getting that same issue with that vertical line where the go day is. And if your go days aren't, although I think hers are more level, but if they're not level, that line is really going to, that pink line is really going to highlight
That
how
middle
that go
one.
day is not sitting.
That one there.
Yeah.
Because it looks like the other one is sort of there, doesn't it? But a better pocket, I think, for Lauren. Yeah.
Well, lower down, probably more where it needs to be.
Yeah. So well done, Lauren. And then we have Lizzie's.
So this is the one where she's put the neck in wrong, and it's riding up at the front. So the neck has been put too far down the front, so that when you wear it, it's pulled the whole thing up.
It needed to be.
It's almost a fishtail at the way that it's come up so much.
And she had issues with the hem too, didn't she? And I was like, oh, I already said last week, one for me to watch out for was Lizzie, and I've started to get attached to. I'm like, oh no, didn't start off well. Start to panic now for the rest of the show. And then Maria. Her pockets were better, but some of them, I can't remember whose it was. I'll have to see if we can find it. Some of them had a pocket here and then a pocket down here.
But even on this one here, they seem much further around the front, and I think they're supposed to be more like on the side. But I'm not an expert at this, but it seemed to be on the model one at the start that they were more. They weren't. These look closer to the front, whereas I think they're supposed to be more underneath, in line with the armholes.
And that comes with the eyeing up, but as you say, we don't know what the pattern was and how are they supposed to get it right? What would they do in reality?
Oh, I would use a tape measure. We saw Tony using a tape measure and Asma using a tape measure, and they produced some good garments.
We did.
So if you're putting a pocket in, measure up, and if you're putting it 6 inches on one side, then it needs to be 6 inches on the other, not under one armpit and hanging off the bottom of the other one. There's
Tony R, or Tony Beanie, as I now call him, because that's how we can remember him by. But yes, Tony was third. Yes, and better pockets there.
Yeah.
And then Vicky was second and Asma was first. So let's take a look at those two. Vicky, let's get rid of that. That lovely navy and white. Nice.
Yeah.
But she had everything crisp. And you can see the pocket there is a sort of better distance between the two where it should be. And then first place, Asma, which we saw, but I haven't got a longer shot of that, which is frustrating. But you saw the yellow coming through in the pockets, and I think we might be able to, if we take that off, you can see the yellow there.
Yes.
And how it's hanging. Look at how that's hanging, for sure. So we've got Asma first, Vicky second, and at the other end we've got Mia 9th, and then Fove 10th. So we've started to. There she is there. So we've got our people to watch out for. The pressure was on them then for the transformation challenge, but I thought that was a nice round. I really enjoyed that round.
What, the pattern challenge?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I think it was actually the whole episode was a breath of fresh air. It was stuff that we haven't seen before, but also it wasn't ridiculous either. I don't think it could have been, because there would have been huge arguments over cultural appropriation and everything. These were just good garments, good patterns, good fabrics.
Yeah.
All carried out really well. And I think that's what made the episode really good. I mean, I think I mentioned to you earlier on, there wasn't, perhaps the drama and the controversy, but sometimes it's just nice to see them have a go. And it was a leveler, because none of them would have done things like this before.
Absolutely.
So, everyone was in the same boat. So it didn't create that drama of, oh, well, I know what I'm doing. And then you watch that person fall apart. Everyone was kind of like, okay, well, we just don't know what any of us are doing. So let's just hope we can all hold it together.
And as we said earlier as well, it was like, oh, this is going to be a nice episode, and maybe not much controversy from our point of view, from a discussion point of view, from a Slipper point of view, because it was actually just nice to watch. I felt the edit was slower too. We had a bit more time, bit more sewing, even though we had a little history bit there. But I loved the guest judge. There was something about the guest judge too. When she spoke, I wanted to listen to her. I wanted to listen to her critique. And I felt she critiqued better too.
The other thing is as well that she knew what the criteria were for each garment, and she stuck to that criteria.
Yeah.
Where a lot of our frustration comes from is that we're told at the start of the challenge, oh, you need to do this. And then halfway through, without seemingly telling the sewers, you've then suddenly got a change in focus or a change in criteria. And then we get to the actual judging of the garment, and everything's changed again because those two just changed their minds. And that then throws the judging off, because at home you start off thinking, oh, well, I'm looking for this to happen. And then we don't see it, or we think we don't see it. And then we're told, oh, well, it doesn't matter. Or actually, it really did matter. And it was a key part of the judging. And whereas this, she explained what needed to happen, and then she judged each garment against those things.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. One thing I did make me giggle was the indigo coming off on their hands. Did you spot it as it went on? Look, I got a quick little
those natural
look at Lizzie's
dyes.
hands there, which I found interesting, because I dye with indigo at the shop with my woe, don't I? It's a form of indigo, and the way that is, it doesn't, what we say, crock off. It doesn't come off on the hands. So I don't know what type of indigo they had.
Well, no, because pure indigo is slightly different. I know it's a shade of blue, but that sort of indigo is a different indigo, and it is known to be very unstable, which is why it can come out. It doesn't hold on to the fabric. It doesn't get set in the same way that you don't set your woad. But it's just very unstable as a result of that.
Comes off. I suppose it's like those jeans that we used to get in the 80s, that when we wore them for the first time.
Because it was dyed with indigo, yeah.
We had blue legs. Right, let's go on to the transformation challenge, which was basically tie-dye. I'm not even going to try and say what it was. I'll get the pronunciation wrong, but it was strips of fabric, which was, as I want to say, azure. And let's have a look.
Well, this again just made it. I mean, if you want to argue against the format of the show, then this wasn't the right transformation challenge, because normally the transformation challenge is, here's something that already exists, and now turn it into something different. Now, if you want to be a purist for the show and get your slippers all ready, then you could argue that this wasn't, because what they were actually just given was some fabric. It
2 meters, 3 meters of fabric.
2 meters or 3 meters of fabric that they were given and told to make something sculptural. Now, I don't have a problem with that, because actually what they produce and the way that fabric behaves, a bit like batiks as well, it's much more stiffer, so you can get those sculptural elements. it worked really well. Was it a transformation challenge? Well, no, because you could argue that any piece of fabric is a transformation challenge. Take a flat bit of fabric and turn it into something. Woo, it's transformed.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
am I worried about that? Am I launching slippers about that? No, because I loved the fact that it wasn't wasteful, that it wasn't ridiculous, and that it was actually, in those 90 minutes, they produced something that, while it was sculptural, after these last couple of weeks as well of me arguing, they were wearable.
Ah, absolutely. Yeah.
And
And
so I actually really enjoyed it. I don't know if you could call it a transformation challenge because you just got a couple of meters of fabric, but it was much more enjoyable to watch than if they'd come out here and said, "Oh, well, we've already got this thing that's already been made, and you've got to do something with it."
well, to me, I can see where you're coming from. I still think that was a wonderful transformation challenge because you've got this fabric here, and you've now got to transform it into a garment. And the technique you need to use is draping. That's all they had to do. Yet
Yeah,
some of them wanted to actually make a garment. So kept going back to the sewing machine and sewing and sewing. So that's where I think they were. The ones that were successful were the ones that did the most draping,
yeah,
literally
yes,
covering it on the model, pinning it into place.
and
Yet some made it
and
harder
yeah.
for themselves, didn't they?
Oh, well, they did, but then you're on a sewing show, and like I said, every other transformation challenge,
Yeah.
even when they gave them bed sheets that year, they had to sew something with it to get it to do what you want it to do. So that's why I'm saying, if you really wanted to throw a slipper, you could, because it wasn't really a transformation challenge. But what they had to do with the skill of draping
Mm.
and the sculptural element, it worked really well as a challenge. Um, and I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it was horrible or I didn't like it or they shouldn't have done it. It's actually way better than what they normally do.
Absolutely, completely agree. And look at that. What you've got there, you've got some stunning garments. So
I mean,
let's
don't get me
take.
wrong. Some of them absolutely messed it up,
Oh,
but some of them did some wonderful sculptural garments as well.
well, let's look at the one that stood out right away from the beginning. As soon as she was draping it on the model, and that's Lizzie. Let's get rid of the group. And I managed to get a wonderful long shot of that. That, just the way she was draping it over the shoulder, pinning it into place, then with the arm and then that bottom bit here. Look at that, how she's managed that. The drape there and the pleats there. You could
I have
see
to say,
straight
though,
away, eh?
I have to say
Oh,
that I think they gave her slightly more credit than what was probably due because they then were going, "Oh, I love how you've managed to work with this fabric so it goes from the yellow to the red and to the..." And I was like, she
yes.
didn't do that. She was too busy wrapping that round there to worry about whether it was going from red to green
Yeah,
to
of
yellow.
course.
The colours was just pure luck. But the silhouette of that is
Is,
phenomenal. And it just
isn't
goes
it?
to show that she hit the brief bang on because it needed to be sculptural because this fabric can take that.
Yeah.
It will take those big folds, it will take those big loops, and it will keep that shape. You couldn't do that with an ordinary cotton or a polyester because it would just hang.
Yeah, absolutely. And another one that was standing out too was Lauren. Again, draping. She'd got the pleats on the bust bit there, and then the twist there, and the drape there, and the fold there. It's
Although I
clearly.
thought this was a bit too fitted. And I know we're not talking about she was about to put it on and nip down to the spa for a pint of milk, but it seemed a little too fitted. Whereas Lizzie's one that had that sculptural element that made it more
Yeah,
voluminous. And to me, I would have done that because you could do that. You can do what she's done there with any fabric because it's all folded and pleated, and any fabric will fold and pleat. You needed to take advantage of the fact that this fabric would hold its shape very easily in quite a big fashion. And it is good. But like I said, you could do that with ordinary fabric. This was kind of that stiffer fabric that you needed to go big on, really.
and so we've talked about draping as a skill and how they should perhaps just put it on the model, pinned and folded it. Some still went for creating a garment and sewing, and I don't know whether. Well, it probably did get them stuck. Who's that? That's Lauren. So let's get rid of Lauren. And we've raved about him many a times. Tony, he even in the edit, I think at the beginning of this scene, he'd had his tape measure out. He was doing measurements and he was working it out. But that's clearly his creativity, isn't it? That's how his creativity works.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to assume anything, but I'm assuming that he probably doesn't make dresses for himself, and that he probably makes them for other people. So he sees a female dummy there. He sees a roll of fabric that he can use.
Yeah.
So he's going to do probably what he's done, and work with that rather than think about the big sculptural draping we've just been talking about.
Yeah, and just what we've talked about this, haven't we? Before the transformation round is you're either going to be really, really creative and let the brain go, or you're probably more of a pattern follower with instructions and precise. And I get the impression that's how his brain works, and hence why he would have made that. That's his comfort
Yeah, but
zone.
also, I think because it was a female garment, maybe if it was a male garment, then he may have been a bit more creative. I mean, it wouldn't have been the same challenge if it was, but I think if I was a man mainly making male garments and then suddenly you're told to make a sculptural dress, to me it would be like, well, I need to make something that looks like that, because that I'm used to working with patterns. Again, assuming quite a lot there, but that would be how I would approach it, and so I'd probably end up doing the same thing.
But to make that in 90 minutes,
I know
he was at
absolutely.
the sewing machine a lot, but that's still impressive. So that's Tony, and then another one who was sort of going for more of a garment make was Maria, with a little bit of draping. Did she have an afterthought or feel, oh, I better do a bit more draping, so then added it into the skirt?
I did feel like it, that she'd made this top and then suddenly realised that she probably hadn't done what she was supposed to. It did not come off very well, did it?
No. And then, of course, you then started to worry about her then when the final sort of ones came in. And then let's have a look at who else have we got to finish off with. Matthew, which I really liked. I felt, who was, what's the name of the lady that we always talk about? I'm ready for my close-up.
Oh, Gloria Swanson.
I just wanted to... I wanted to have my hands up and just waft down a staircase in this. And in his transfer, his made to measure one as well. But you can see it draped there. There's not much draping going on, but there's a little there.
It's draped and shaped. It's not sculptural like Lizzie's was in that it's holding its own weight up, but the weight has been put in, so it creates that shape and that cape and the layers and the way it's all pleated within it.
But you've got to keep telling yourself 90 minutes, and for that creativity to see that, the draping. But yes, you say some were fitted, some not so. Just there was such a wide variety there. Let us know what your favourites were, viewers, out of those 10. Any others there, Ting, that you like the look of?
No, I think you got the ones that I did, because Lizzie and Matt were quite good.
Really pleased with that. So the standing on that was Maria was 10th, and Tony Beanie there, which we were talking about, which obviously went against the whole, not as much draping. And at the other end, we've got Lizzie there first and Lauren second. So there we go. So we're going then into the made to measure round with, who have we got at the bottom end? We've got Maria in the bottom from round 2, and then Fauve in the bottom for round 1. So you're starting to feel for them. And then, yes, some of them were 9th and 10th. Well, you got Mia in the bottom there. Fauve again for the transformation challenge. So they need to start pulling out. The pressure's on them, isn't it, to pull out a big make for this round.
I must admit, Fauve, I thought had it at that point, with Maria not far behind. I think, we've got to our bottom 2. I thought someone's going to have to mess up royally in the last challenge to knock those two off the bottom, really.
Now, I haven't heard much of how this was filmed, but I'm guessing they're back home for a week and practicing for a week. Have you heard
I don't
anything?
know. It could be, or, lots of things changed since COVID. They probably found it was cheaper to film it over 4 weeks than it was to film it over 10 weeks. So they may not be going home. They may have gone for, 2 weeks and they've been going like the clappers.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll hear something on the grapevine, because I think that does affect the way we debate the show, doesn't it? If we know they've had time to practice, then you go like, well, why didn't you practice? But we all know they've still got their jobs as well, and managing all that to do. You can't, even though you're on a show, you want to practice every night. Sometimes you may not be able to. So let's go to the Made to Reg round. We'll try and scoot through each one. We're at 35 minutes in, so that's about right. That's about 15, 20 minutes to have a look at them, and we'll go through in alphabetical order. So they had to make a boo-boo, and I the only way I could remember to get this right was to think of what's his name, Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo, Boo-Boo.
Wouldn't you have gone with Yogi Bear?
Oh yeah, oh that's it. I knew it was some. When I was thinking about it, I was like, that's the way to remember it. I thought, I'm sure. It didn't seem right, but I thought I was happy with that. Yes, Yogi Bear. Right, so they had to make a boo-boo. And there was some stunning designs, and I was loving this whole round. The fabrics that were chosen.
Again, I think it was just another one where it just worked. And having her there as a judge, and again, saying right from the start, the fabric that they choose and the pattern that they choose should tell some sort of story about them or whoever's wearing it or whatever. So, we got those little stories as well of why they've chosen, the colours that they did or the pattern that they did. And then they actually executed them, really quite well. There wasn't a huge kind of gap between the top and the bottom. They'd all done really quite well. I think Patrick did say, because this isn't a fully fitted garment, there was an element of the fit was perhaps not one of the biggest things to worry about with this. You're getting a bit pen happy with this, aren't you?
Well, that's the only one thing I wanted to talk about with this round, that I felt that some of them just missed that most important bit about the brief. And that's, as Patrick said, and I think she said, that it's traditionally big and breezy. I think that was her words. That's what I've written down. And then Patrick, as you just said it was a simple fit. But it felt like, did some of them miss that bit out of the brief about it being big and breezy? Because some of them just then went for a fit, didn't they? And it was like, that was the only time I was shouting at the telly going, no, why have you not gone big and breezy? Why have you fitted it right down and put a belt around it or whatnot?
I think, there's an element of what they were doing was probably a westernized version. A westernized version of it.
You're right.
And you're doing that thing again of, like, they were told you should tell a story with it, and they did that, and that was the reason why it was the way it was. Also, again, for all of them, this will not have been something they've made before. No. So when they're looking at, maybe they've found 2 or 3 different patterns online, they might not really understand until they get there for the filming that it's supposed to be big and breezy, because there'll be some that are slightly more fitted and some that are much bigger, but they would have, by that time, they would have already chosen their pattern and their fabric and their story. So they're kind of locked in at that stage as well.
Yeah, but what was refreshing about it was when it came to the judging, they kept coming back. She kept coming back to that. So therefore, you can understand how the decisions were made. So let's have a quick look through. Again, sometimes it was hard to get the full shot. It depends on how they filmed it. But there's Asma's there. Oh, the fabric was
Hers was
stunning.
very much influenced by the fact of her like Muslim background, because they, like she said, they have a version of this, but it is
Yeah,
more fitted, and that's what she's done.
yeah.
And so, she fulfilled the brief of it being,
That's her story as well.
a story
Yeah.
to tell, and it was still. It was still big. Yes, she put a belt. She belted it round the waist, but you've still got the big arms there, and the skirt was still voluminous. It wasn't that it was like a fitted little pencil skirt that she was tottering out in.
Cool. But putting that lace on top of that satin, oh,
Well, it's sewing bee. It's not just it's a competition.
oh, yeah. The skills in there were phenomenal, and that Georgette when she was coming down the catwalk was something else.
I mean, she also made the turban there, didn't she? If we have got Gloria Swanson, here she comes.
Yeah.
Ready for her close-up, Mr.
Well,
Neil, with her turban on.
So many of these were that. You could tell the models were loving it. Well, we'll see on this next one with Fauve. The models are coming down. I bet they had a whale of a time on this catwalk.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Lovely. But yes, is that the best of both worlds? Breezy with the arms.
Well,
but
yeah, you've got a bit of both, haven't you?
Yeah.
You've got it fitted in, and you've got to do something, or otherwise you're just wearing a sheet with a hole cut in the middle. So, it's got to be fitted somewhere, or otherwise you're just wafting around like Casper the Friendly Ghost.
Well, as I say, it was like the ghost scene in our panto, wasn't it? When we needed a couple of kids to come on, trying to nick your lunchbox or whatever scene that was. Then we've got Mia.
It's like a take on a maxi dress, really, there, isn't it?
Yeah. Beautiful.
But very much her style, given her age and her demographic, she's made that to fit her sort of style.
Yeah. And that metallic just there. I'm not sure about that bit, but it does break it up. If you didn't have that,
it breaks up, and again, that is a bit of an African thing as well, isn't it? To break up those patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we've got so that was Mia. Thank you, Mia. Lauren. And this reminded me, and I'm sorry, Lauren, for saying this. I loved it, but I also felt it was you at the pantomime. This is your costume, Tim. And
how very dare you?
That blue one, that 90 that we were going to do on our last live. I felt it was this. Was that maybe, is that me? But I just felt that was the wrong choice. Did it just...
There's nothing wrong with elevating your wear by putting a bit of ostrich feather on.
Yes, viewers, let us know what you think. I just thought it turned a wonderful garment into, it just then felt like a fancy dress or a costume, a theatrical costume.
But again, that's probably coming at it from this perspective. If you were looking at it from, an African perspective, they probably would incorporate those sorts of things in there as well.
But when the judges were talking and the specialist judge took over, it was I understood that point. This should have gone up and over, and she said it wouldn't have been better for that to have come down. But that's a big skill, making your binding there into a proper V. So I can understand why that perhaps was not done. But yes, those feathers, I just thought. But when that model walked down the catwalk and you saw the leg part, it moved wonderfully. So thank you, Lauren. Even though the ostrich feathers. Lizzie, well, this blew me away when I saw it even being made. What about you? What did you think?
Oh, absolutely. And I always have, a bit of respect for someone who has to make the fabric before they can even use it. She had to make that, in effect, big bit of patchwork there. She had to get all of those panels sewn together before she could even then think about turning it into that outfit. So, it would have been very easy to just have that as a single colour and, do it in the same way. But by having all those different colours in there as well, and again, her story was the colours, the reason she'd chosen those colours, and it just worked.
Oh,
it was brilliant.
Well, we know in patchwork how hard it is to get those seams meeting. And when she
Well-
turned round, you could see it really clear. That would not have been anywhere near as effective if those lines weren't parallel and didn't meet, would it?
Well, it's hard for you because you don't use a pin. That's what your problem is. Everyone else can get their corners to match.
Now, did she? I'll have words with you later. Did you? I'll be chucking a slipper at you. Did she? I think Lizzie was successful here because she followed the brief. Yes, with the story, but big and breezy. She spent that time because it was only 4 hours, so they've reduced the time because of the simplicity of this round.
I mean, yeah, I was going to say I'm not going to accept the challenge to make one, but it is relatively easy to do compared to some of the things they normally do in this challenge.
Was that just not clever? It's like, right, okay, I'm going to keep with big and breezy. I've got my story, and I'm going to keep with big and breezy because I can then put the time in to make the fabric and then do that wonderful one skill and nail it on the front there, rather than having to do this skill, put that on top of that fabric, then put a belt on, put a button on and whatnot. That, to me, was knocked out the park, as in brief-wise.
Strengths, don't you? Because she's done that in the same way that Asma knew that she could do the lace on top of hers. She knew she could do it, so why not do it? And I imagine here Lizzie knew that she could, she's probably done some patchwork and stuff like that along the way as well. But, she knew she could do this, so why not do it? And that is where you go back to it being a competition. We could all come on there and make a basic dress, but you need to be able to show off what you can do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And know that and almost have that pre-planned. Like, if this comes up, I'm going to do that. If this comes up, I could do that.
To be fair, I don't think they could have pre-planned this. No one would have known they were doing a West Africa week.
Oh, no. But they've got the week, haven't they? But maybe with the transformation round, like me, I've made an apron before. Not very well, but I'm going to make an apron if that fitted. You maybe have these things set. I suppose it depends on what you're going on there for, whether it's for the experience or whether, as you say, it's competition. You want to go for it. Right, we're halfway through. Maria. Oh, let's get rid of Lizzie too. I thought when I saw this that this might have done like really, really well because that Georgette was just. Oh, can you imagine coming off the beach and putting that on and walking to the bar and asking for a cocktail?
But that's not what it's supposed to do.
I know, but
I thought it was a bit too sheer. Yeah. I agreed with Esme that you don't want sequins and the diamonds; it should be one or the other. And I mean, I don't know how much they know about their model, but I just didn't think that it went with the skin tone of the model. I felt it either. I felt it washed her out a bit. It needed to be a different colour, I think.
What,
unless that
the fabric?
Doing it very much justice, yeah.
See, I didn't mind when you like Esme said, do you think that should have been a different colour to that?
No, it's the fact that she put the diamonds around the necklace, didn't she? And she put the sequins around the belt, and
I see. Yes,
two different. They needed to be the same. If you're going to trim it in the same thing.
But the brief, breezy, it was wonderfully flowing, wasn't it? But yes, I know there was a pucker on the back as well, wasn't there? But I thought at that stage, oh, maybe she's done enough to save herself. Matt, here we go. Matthew, should I say? Sorry. I actually thought that because we know he loves a harness, don't we? I actually thought that was the right place for it. Patrick said it should have been higher and more of a feature. But I'm like thinking, I don't want that. If that was me, that would be near my Adam's apple. There's nothing worse.
Don't you start with things up around your neck. After all the grief I got last year.
Let's get Deborah in from last year. That'd be good if we could get her as a special guest.
She'd love that if it was up tight around the neck.
But I think that would have been too high, and I could then imagine Patrick saying, "Oh, it needs to come down a bit." I don't know. What do you think?
I think so. I think given the nature of the garment, it's not supposed to be all clingy and tight and up round your neck. It It's where it needs
Oh,
to be so that garment still can flow.
absolutely. And also
Yep.
because it's lower in that third, so it's in that bottom third, I think it becomes then quite discreet. It's a little statement, but it's not going ka-ching, look at me in this lovely harness here. So you
Which,
actually blend.
for Matthew's unnatural, because normally it would make a much
Yes,
bigger
yeah.
statement.
But I think that's where it's a good mix of the idea of because I think blokes have the curve normally neck, and then the women have the V. So it's kind of an amalgamation of the two. So a nice blending. I know Patrick wasn't too sure about this firmer fabric in with the loose fabric. To me, I think it worked. It gives it some body as that model walked down that runway.
Yeah, but I think I think the weights were too different, and so therefore, then when he fully came to a stop, it just didn't hang right in places, possibly because that was too heavy.
Okay, 3 more to go. Tony Beanie.
Yep, just a little bit too fitted again. I know
Yeah,
it
I
came
think
out
so.
bottom, but again, that's potentially because he's making a female garment. He's making a dress. He's working with a model, and he's used to making fitted things, probably.
And when I was watching it, and Esme said, "Oh, I can't see the frill," and I went, "There is no frill," but actually there is, and now I can see it. Yes,
There is. It's just the fabric, isn't it? The fabric has got that in it as well.
And I can understand how perhaps that wasn't as effective as it could have been, for sure.
Yeah.
And here we go. This is me coming down the staircase again.
To all those people in the dark, all those people who know me and love me.
This was my second
I loved
favourite.
it.
Yeah.
I loved it. It just came across as if she was wearing a sheet, though. And that basically doesn't give Tony the justice that it deserves. Because although maybe it does, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's the fact that it looks like that, but it had all that work go into it. But I loved it.
Yeah. I would be doing Wonder Woman twizzles in this all day, for sure. And then we finish off with Vicky. It's very her, isn't it? So you can see her story through that completely.
It is very her. I just felt that it was one of the ones, again, where she tried to probably fit it too much. And I could see how it's her, but, brief-wise, it needed to be a bit more voluminous.
Mm. And well, it comes back to again, doesn't it? That thanks, Vicky. It comes back to that brief, doesn't it? And as we've discussed many times, and I think even Adam, when we had Adam on from a couple of seasons ago, didn't he say sometimes they get the brief, but they'll then go off and film Patrick and Esme, and maybe the brief gets changed a bit or tweaked a bit. I know that's us really analysing it, but when you get to your brief through, I suppose you have to make a call about where, which route do I go? Do I go down the story route more than the big and breezy route? How do you combine the two? And then, as you say, do you panic and think, well, this is a bit too easy? It's like me and my maths lessons or whatever. 2 + 2. Oh, that's a bit too easy. It being 4. Let's make it much more difficult for myself and make it equal 4.5 by doing this, 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 and this, and then coming out with a sewing garment that's that's just missed the brief. What?
Okay. It's a bit like that story, really. Yeah, quite missed it.
Exactly. So who did get Garment of the Week? Of course, it was that. They fell in love with that right from the beginning, I felt. When Lizzie was telling a story.
Yeah, I think we agreed that was a good one.
Yeah. And then we sadly had to say goodbye to someone. Who did you think it was going to be?
I thought it was going to be Fauve.
Fauve or Maria. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be Fauve.
Yeah.
Although I have to say, I was getting a bit sick and tired of Maria only making purple things. So,
well, it was beginning to turn into Oh, he
It
was
was
the
just
ninth.
beginning to grate a bit. It was
Yeah.
just like, come on, be a bit more
Yeah.
creative, please.
Yeah, Mia was 9th, Foth was 10th for the pattern challenge, and then almost the other way around, Foth was 8th and Maria was 10th in the transformation challenge. So it was really one of those.
Yeah.
And yeah, sadly, we had to say goodbye to Maria. So sorry, Maria, you've gone. And Ting, slippers.
Well, no, because this was a good episode. The only time the slippers flew was when they told us what's on next week.
Right. How many went? 1 or 2? I would have
Two
thought
slippers
2.
went, a pair of Doc Martens and a welly boot. All in the last 30 seconds of the show.
Oh, they were doing so well. Yes, because next week is our favourite reduce, reuse, and recycle week. Oh, yeah. Have you got nightmares already?
I don't think the slipper count will go high enough. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take those 2 slippers off, really, because I think that's...
They got nothing to do with the episode, no.
Absolutely. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Although maybe we need to start putting them on now, because I don't feel that there'll be enough for next. So we probably need to start putting them on.
But it might be a good one because they're doing it with crochet blankets, patchwork blankets. And we're crocheters and
what happens
patchworkers.
when you cut that, it's all going to fall apart, isn't it? It's going to be an absolute carnage.
Oh, look forward to it. I hope you enjoyed it. Not too much controversy this round because it was a lovely episode. So refreshing, as you said right at the beginning, Ting. Something different. And the judging, well, that lady judge was wonderful. Could have watched her more. Maybe let's have that more Sewing Bee people. Love Productions. Let's get some more guest judges and hear their expertise and celebrate their skills. So
I can give them my availability if they need me.
Shut up. Let us know in the comments. I will get round to replying. Love reading them, and it's always great to talk about them the following week too. So see you next week, everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Wrong button.